A journey to a very familiar location, but with a twist. A little more insight into Rayner and his background. And a Star Trek race we've known for many, many years, finally revealed. All of that coming up. Hey everyone, I'm Nick and welcome back to Sci-Finatics. Well, today we're talking about episode 5 of season 5 Star Trek Discovery, entitled Mirrors. This was a very interesting episode. Not only did we get a familiar location in the form of the sets they use on Strange New Worlds to be not the USS Enterprise, but the ISS Enterprise, which we kind of knew was going to be the case. They dropped a few trailers in the past and everything, which showed Mol and Lark in the sickbay with the Terran Empire logo on the screens in the background and so forth. So for those of us who'd seen all the trailers that have been out, this was no surprise we were going to end up at this location. But we weren't in the mirror universe. This ISS Enterprise had been, I guess, swept into this extra-dimensional space from the mirror universe. So I guess this is like a weird sort of pocket of extra dimensional space that occupies the space in between the mirror universe and the prime universe. There's a lot of reveals in this episode, which I'm obviously going to talk about today in my review, so it's probably best that you have seen the episode before continuing watching this video, because there's some pretty sizable spoilers we're going to be talking about. The main one, of course, being the reveal of the Star Trek race known as the Breen that we've known about for many, many years, going back to Next Generation and so forth, where we finally got to see what a Breen looks like without their helmet on. So let's get into this week's review and breakdown of episode 5, Star Trek Discovery, season 5, entitled Mirrors. Our episode starts with a personal log from Book talking about Mol, his backstory relating to Cleveland Booker the Fourth, the connection there that he's got with Mol, and just the objective that he has to try to, I guess, talk her down. Lord knows, Book's been through some interesting choices, as has Michael Burnham in the past. They're both done wrong and have, I guess, atoned for their ways. So I guess he wants to kind of pass this message along to Mol. Next, we find out through Stamets and Tilly that they are in the right place for the next puzzle piece. However, it's not visible on the particular spectrum, so they had to kind of, rejig the view screen to be able to reveal the wormhole that is going to lead them to extra-dimensional space where the next puzzle piece is found. And of course, Burnham has to lead the away team because she's such a control freak. Rayner reminds her of the Starfleet code that, hang on, first officers are meant to lead away teams. It's the captain's place to stay on the bridge of the ship. But we all know how Burnham likes to run the show, so she gives Rayner the bridge of Discovery while she has all the fun on the away mission. Next, we get our very first mention of Rayner's race and where he's from. Of course, he is a Kelleran, the species that was established in the DS9 episode Armageddon game. Although they seem to have changed their hairstyles. They had these weird black man buns going on in that episode of DS9, but obviously they've kind of toned back the whole man bun kind of scenario for the 32nd century. And we get Burnham referencing a Kelleran quote here. Rayner's a bit impressed that she's done a bit of research about his culture. So it's interesting that we're finally getting a little bit of information about Rayner's history and everything. Up until this point, we're halfway through the season now, episode 5 of 10, and I'm thinking, we've never mentioned Kelleran before, we've never mentioned anything about his race or anything like that, so it's like, I'm thinking, why did they make this character Kelleran? Like, well, they could have just made him human. It seemed like they hadn't actually started to delve into anything relating whatsoever to his race in the show so far. So I was kind of starting to wonder as to why they were bothering, but we seem to get a bit of a reference in this episode, so I guess that's good. Burnham and Book take a shuttlecraft into the wormhole because the wormhole's too small for Discovery to fit through. We see that Mol and Lark's ship, being a bit bigger than a shuttlecraft, was destroyed upon entering of this wormhole, and only half of the ship is intact. The other half is all smashed to bits and everything. Although they thought maybe they've been killed, it soon becomes apparent that they are hiding out on an intact vessel that is hidden within this pocket of extra-dimensional space, which is the ISS Enterprise, the counterpart to the USS Enterprise from the Mirror Universe. It's been pulled through from the Mirror Universe into this pocket of extra-dimensional space, so we're not setting this episode in the Mirror Universe, which is what we kind of thought because we knew this was going to be the ISS Enterprise. While Book and Burnham are over on the Enterprise there, obviously they've lost contact with Discovery, they can't communicate, so it's Tilly's job to rip panels open in sickbay to try to boost power for some reason to get to get comms back online. And we get a sense here that maybe Culber's going through some stuff since becoming Janal and a few episodes ago. Maybe a little bit off kilter because of it. We get a reference here, Tilly talking about a crewman with a Cardassian vole as a pet. Obviously, voles were vermin that ran around Deep Space Nine or whatever, infestations of rodent-like creatures that are obviously of Cardassian origin. Rayner gets the guys to get a few ideas happening, try to get the comms fixed. Rayner only likes people to talk to him in short sentences. His attention span seems very brief. So it's like, I want a solution, but only give it to me in one sentence, or only give it to me in 20 words or something. There seems to be a kind of a recurring thing with him. We also find out to Adira's disgust that Kellorans in fact boil their cakes, which sounds absolutely disgusting. Back on the bridge of the Enterprise, there's a nice little moment here with Burnham looking at the science station and kind of, I guess, remembering that her brother Spock was serving on board the Enterprise and that was his station. So I thought that was a nice little moment with her, just to acknowledge her brother. All of the crew seem to have evacuated the Enterprise and all of the logs have been deleted. And we soon learn that the crew of the ISS Enterprise mutinied from the Terran Empire. They didn't want to be part of the warring ways, I guess, of the Terran Empire. And they escaped the Mirror Universe to try to get through to the Prime Universe to start a new life. And it appears they were successful, led by none other than Mirror Universe version of Saru. We saw in a previous episodes that took place in the Mirror Universe, where he was a slave and he was downtrodden and everything. So he obviously is, somehow managed to capture the ship with a bunch of other kind of refugees and escape. Although this Mirror Universe crossing happened at the end of Season 3, once they were already in the 32nd century. But it was involving the Guardian of Forever, which involves time travel, so I guess that's how it's explained. Next we get a shootout in sickbay on the Enterprise, where Burnham and Book face off against a bunch of hologram moles and larks. My initial thought on this is like, should they have like a complete holodeck array of projectors and everything in the sickbay of the Enterprise? This kind of seems like the technology is perhaps a little bit too advanced for a ship of the 23rd century. Next we get the first of our big flashbacks in this episode, where we get to see the first meeting between Mole and Lark. And we pretty much find out that Lark is a Breen. And the reason that Mole and Lark are running away is because they both have an Erigar against them, which is a Breen blood bounty. They've betrayed the Breen, gone on the run, and they need the Progenitor's tech to sell back to the Breen in order to clear their names. The helmets are a little bit different to how we saw them back in TNG or DS9 kind of era of Star Trek. I was always of the assumption, because the original masks had such a large kind of snout on them, I was under the impression that Breen, being a very cold planet, and basically every single reference to Breen being almost like an Arctic kind of environment, that because of the snout on the masks, that the Breen would end up looking, I don't know, like polar bears or walruses or sea lions or something. But that wasn't the case. They sort of look like metamorphosizing green jelly-faced sort of aliens. I mean, I don't hate the makeup for the Breen, and I don't think it's awful or anything, but I guess it did seem a little bit odd that when we'd previously established the shape of the helmets and everything from previous Star Trek shows that have this very prominent snout on them, that the shape of their heads didn't in any way match this appearance. That kind of maybe disappointed me a little bit, that consistency didn't hold true. And I guess you could pass it off as being, well, obviously they needed some, electronics or some machinery built into the front part of the helmets to help them breathe, because they, if they're off-world and not on their own planet, they need this as a breathing system or whatever. A bit like sort of Darth Vader's helmet in Star Wars has got a breathing capacity in it or whatever. But that being said, we did see all these flashback scenes with the Breen on their own ship, and they were still wearing all their helmets and everything on their own ship, which you think, well, if they're on their own ship with their own environment on that ship, why do they need to wear helmets with breathing gear and everything potentially in them? So that sort of struck me as a little bit odd, why they just aren't all walking around without helmets on. Like, I get it if they travel off-world, go to a different, planet and so forth, that they need the helmets there to breathe. But obviously, as well, we've got Mole on the Breen ship breathing the Breen atmosphere. So it's like, what? Have they switched the atmosphere on their ship so that it's oxygen, so that Mole can breathe the atmosphere, and every single one of the other Breens on their ship must wear a helmet to breathe. It's sort of, there's a few of these little inconsistencies that I thought, that kind of seems a little bit odd. Surely on this ship, Mole should be the one that's wearing an oxygen breathing system, and none of the Breen have helmets on. So yeah, there was just these few little things that kind of struck me as a little odd. Back on the Enterprise, we get a force field malfunction. Burnham and Lark get trapped in sickbay behind force fields, can't get out. So Book and Mole need to go to the bridge to fix the situation. And it's a bit of an uneasy alliance between these two. Book's trying to talk Mole down off the proverbial ledge. She's kind of got an itchy trigger finger. And there's a lot of stories coming out of Book establish a common bond, a common connection. We see the true Breen face there. Obviously, it was established in here that the Breen kind of have two faces. One is their true face, which is that sort of gelatinous, sort of partially transparent, green glowing sort of skin and so forth. They have another face which is their sort of more solid form, which is the appearance that we see from Lark since the start of the season. But apparently this is a face that not many Breens like to adopt, and it's kind of considered to be dirty or unsavoury or not kind of their true self. If the Breen do have this kind of weird sort of semi-shapeshiftery kind of ability to change between their gelatinous kind of transparent green faces and their more solid faces, like we've seen Lark's appearance since the start of the season, this kind of now makes sense as to why the Breen would ally themselves with the Dominion and the shapeshifters and everything back during the Dominion War, because they probably saw a little bit of a commonality between their species, perhaps. So this aspect I quite liked. I thought, oh, that makes sense as to why the Breen would potentially see some commonality there between the changelings. But I still think it would have been nice to see their actual facial shape more closely resemble the shape of the helmets that were established back in DS9. Lark and Burnham have a bit of a standoff there in sickbay, and a bit of a fight ensues, throwing each other around through walls, over bench tops and everything, which end in Lark taking a bit of an injury during this conflict, and he needs some serious medical treatment. And Lark ended up choosing Mole over his own people, murdering several other Breen officers and wounding his uncle in the process, and escaping with Mole. So here we kind of basically know why they're on the run. The Breen are after them, and they want to essentially buy their freedom and go and live on some relaxing planet somewhere in the Gamma Quadrant. Trying to take down the force fields, but there's a bit of an accident on the bridge. We get some explosions going off. The shuttlecraft is lost, and the Enterprise starts drifting towards the aperture of the wormhole, and they've only got 8 minutes to solve the problem before the ship is destroyed. We get a standoff between Mole and Book, but she decides not to kill him. Book manages to maybe get through to her just a little tiny bit. And Burnham needs to send a message to Rayner to recite some old Kelleran story about the Ballad of Krull, so that Burnham can let Rayner know that they need help getting out. But they come up with a way to expand the aperture of the wormhole enough to get the Enterprise back and out of the pocket of extra-dimensional space. I love the bit when they were driving out of the wormhole there, and Book asks Burnham, "Shall I hit it?" Obviously being Pike's catchphrase to go to warp from Strange New Worlds, and she goes, no, it doesn't quite feel right, just fly, you know. So she uses her go to warp, even though they're not going to warp, but she uses her let's go phrase or catchphrase rather than Book's one that he steals from Captain Pike. So I thought that was a nice little nod to them being on the Enterprise bridge. Mole and Lark steal a little shuttle to get off the ship. Why couldn't have they all used this shuttle? I'm a bit fuzzy as to how they just suddenly found this extra shuttlecraft. They call it a Terran warp pod, but let's face it, it's a shuttlecraft. I mean, the thing can hold at least 2 people plus supplies and has got the capacity to go to warp. It's a shuttlecraft. This would have solved a lot of problems if they had have found this a bit earlier, because it kind of seemed to me they didn't have any means off the ship. Their shuttle was destroyed. All they had was the Enterprise. But then all of a sudden, once we're back in the Prime Universe again, they say, oh, they've managed to find a shuttle. What, down the back cushions of the couch somewhere? They just managed to miraculously find a shuttle they previously didn't find? That kind of seemed a bit odd to me. And apparently, Detmer and Awoshikin get to fly the Enterprise back to Federation HQ. Why are they flying it back? Clearly for about the last 4 episodes, We've had nothing but poor old Reese saying what a fanboy he is of the Constitution class. Every single episode he's been dropping comments about how much he loves the Constitution class. They finally get a Constitution class. Not only does he not get to fly the Constitution class back to Federation HQ, that job goes to Detmer and Oo, but he doesn't even get a moment on the bridge where he lovingly looks at it and comments about, oh my God, it's a Constitution class. I love that so much. He's been doing nothing but gushing over the Constitution class since the season started, and a perfect moment here for him to, I don't know, make some sort of comment or something, just didn't happen. I thought, what a lost opportunity. Back in the bar on Discovery, we get a little scene between Culber and Tilly just talking about everything that they've been through. The fact that Culber's died and come back to life, and then he's recently been Janal, and he's obviously had the experiences of Trill symbionts and many hosts in his head and all that sort of stuff, and how that's affecting him. Next we find out the name of one of the other scientists that hid the puzzle piece for this particular part of the puzzle. Their name was Dr. Cho. And they're the ones that was part of the original posse between Dr. Velik and the other scientists that were charged with the hiding of these clues. And we get a little bit more of a glimmer that maybe the relationship between Book and Burnham isn't all over. Maybe there's hope for that yet. Along with the puzzle piece they retrieved, they've also got a vial with some little blue liquid in it that needs analysing. So they're off to analyse that, which I'm guess is going to have some sort of clue about the next place to look for the next puzzle piece. I think we've got 3 pieces to the puzzle now, and we've got 2 more pieces to find. So it'll be interesting to see where that next clue leads. All in all, I quite enjoyed this episode. I think it was great that we got to see the Breen for the first time with their helmets off. It's probably a little bit overdue. But did you like this this reveal? Leave some thoughts in the comments section, guys, about the Breen. Were you satisfied with the appearance of the Breen? How the Breen were portrayed in this episode? Lived up to the expectation that's been hidden from us since going back to Next Generation days? Leave a thought in the comments section and we'll get chatting about that. Just a heads up that there's a sale at the moment in my merch store, 15% off everything until Monday the 29th of April. So be sure to pick yourself up a hoodie or a t-shirt or a mug or a cap or something. 15% off, great discount, helps support the channel as well. Also, if you haven't subscribed to Sci-Finatics yet, please be sure to do so. Click on that big subscribe button to stay current and up to date with all the latest Star Trek news on YouTube. I'll be back soon with, I'm guessing, my breakdown of the sneak peek scene for our next episode 6 of Discovery. I'll see you guys then.